Okay, I'm Myron Gutman. I'm glad to be here. I'm the director of the Institute of Behavioral Science, one of a long, actually a short line of directors of the Institute of Behavioral Science. And we're here to honor one of the founders of the Institute, and therefore I'm here to sort of make a couple of opening remarks. So Dick Jessor, we're honoring Dick Jessor here, the inaugural Dick Jessor Memorial lecture. I have 2 more years. Yeah, good. So this is others, we're going to say things about Dick and about our speaker tonight. I just want to add that I want to say for my part that Dick has played just an integral role in the Institute. And for me, that wouldn't be enough to say, except to say how much he's meant to me personally as I've taken up the role here as one of his successors, one of his small and inadequate successors in the leadership of the Institute. My main job today, beyond welcoming all of you, is to introduce Dr. Phil DiStefano, who is the Chancellor of the University of Colorado Boulder, and who's going to say a few more things about Dick and embarrass him, I think, totally. So Phil DiStefano is the Chancellor of the University of Colorado Boulder. He's been in that role since 2009. He's been on campus since 1974, about half as long as Dick Jessor has been on campus. And he's played an enormous number of very important roles on our campus as a faculty member, as a dean, as provost, and now as chancellor. And it's wonderful to have him with us today. It's part of what I love about this campus, which is our ability to bring the leadership and the active research members of the campus and the teachers together on a regular basis. So the important part today is our speaker. So I hope, Phil, if you're ready, and we'll go forward and let you speak now.
Thank you, Myron, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural Richard Jessor Distinguished Lecture on Health and Society. And it's especially fitting to have an annual lecture named in honor of one of our most distinguished professors and our longest-serving faculty member. When Distinguished Professor Jay Mencken asked me if I would introduce the lecture, I was honored. I was honored not only because of Dick's legacy, but also because Dick and I have been longtime associates, but more importantly, longtime friends. Well, I've been on campus, as Myron said, since 1974. Dick has been at CU at Boulder since 1951. He arrived at the age of 26, thinking he would hang out for a while before moving on to civilization on the east or the west coast. He's still here. In the meantime, he helped found the Institute of Behavioral Science in 1957 and served as its director for more than 2 decades. He also founded its Problem Behavioral Program and its Health and Society Program and holds the rank of Professor Emeritus of Psychology. His areas of research have included adolescent and young adult development, the social psychology of risk behavior, health behavior, and psychosocial aspects of poverty. Dick and I have enjoyed many connections over the years. We both started as assistant professors here. We both earned our PhDs at The Ohio State. It wasn't called The when we were there, Dick. They call it The now. And we both worked for CU Boulder for decades. This lecture is the first in a series that is designed to honor the great career of Dick Jessor, whose contributions to the behavioral sciences and to the University of Colorado Boulder place him among the most influential scholars of his generation. Dick was named Distinguished Professor of Behavioral Science in 2005. It is of course, one of our highest honors, and consider that there are only 49 distinguished professors in the history of the campus. And Dick has consulted for the National Institutes of Alcohol and Drug Abuse, the CDC, the National Academy of Sciences, the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and many others. And for 10 years, he was director of the MacArthur Foundation Research Network on successful adolescent development among youth in high-risk settings. He has authored or edited more than 140 publications, including 13 books. His service to the university also has been stellar. He served on the faculty council, the Academic Affairs Advisory Council. He taught in the graduate training program and has served on numerous faculty searches and internal review committees. In 1970, he wrote the first comprehensive plan to increase faculty, student, and staff diversity at CU Boulder. It was called the Equality of Educational Opportunity at the University of Colorado, or as most of us say, the Jessor Report. And it's easy to forget that many of us had biographies before we even came to the university, and Dick's biography is spectacular. During World War II, he served in the Marine Corps, took part in the invasion of Iwo Jima, and was awarded the Purple Heart. He climbed mountains from Ecuador to Tanzania to Nepal. In a newspaper interview, he once compared mountain climbing to academic research. One is a slow toil in which a researcher can work for years before seeing results. The other is life on the edge, constant risk, immediate pinnacle. They offset each other, he said, and together they make him complete. This is a man who ran his first New York Marathon at the age of 65, the first of 8 consecutive New York marathons. So I think of Dick also as a futurist. He founded the Institute of Behavioral Science nearly 60 years ago, and today it confronts salient problems in contemporary life in need of urgent solutions. IBS has always been ahead of its time, a role for interdisciplinary research. From the beginning, instead of looking at issues by discipline, it was organized around solving problems. Its work has huge implications for policymakers, lawmakers, government, and social agencies in solving society's most perplexing social challenges. And it demonstrates our strength as a university in the social sciences. And I often talk about our 3 campus imperatives: lead, innovate, and impact. And once again, Dick is ahead of the future. The Institute of Behavioral Science does all 3. So Dick Jessor has his fingerprints on our past and on our future at CU. And this lecture in his name is especially benefiting. And as I said, I'm very pleased to be here for the inaugural Richard Jessor Distinguished Lecture, and delighted, and thank you, Jane, that I was asked to give the welcome. I appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Boardman. I'm a professor in the Department of Sociology, and I'm director of the Health and Society program. Closer? Thanks, everybody. My name is Jason Boardman. I am a professor in the Department of Sociology, the director of the Health and Society program with the Institute of Behavioral Science here on campus, and I am incredibly fortunate to have the opportunity to introduce Sir Michael Marmot, our speaker for the evening. Hyperbole cannot enhance the reputation of Sir Michael or the contribution that his ideas and his work have made to the biological, psychological, and social sciences. His work has helped us solidify the now common sense understanding that one's social context, social standing in a bigger context, and that meanings associated with status such as gender, class, race, and other indicators of social location have an incredible influence on people's health throughout their life course. Akin to Durkheim's understanding of suicide as a social fact, and thus a property of social context, so too is overall health. He's made it very clear that social inequality has independent influences on overall health, not just those at the so-called bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. It's unhealthy for everybody. This understanding necessitates a careful and comprehensive understanding of the multidimensional nature of individual social contexts and how those change over time. It is incredibly fitting that someone of Sir Michael's standing and influence in the field delivers this important inaugural Jessor lecture. As Phil made clear, Dick Jessor's contributions to our understanding of risk and resilience as social phenomena has made long-lasting and incredibly strong impressions of the understanding of problem behavior rather than a limited focus on characteristics of the individual. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Sir Michael Marmot, our keynote speaker of the evening.
It's an absolute pleasure to be doing this and honouring Dick Jessor. We met, I think, only once before, but we made, I think, a big impression on each other. And then coming here, meeting Jane, I said, it feels like we're old friends. And in fact, I feel so at home that I'm going to take my jacket off. I started in this area with the Whitehall studies of British civil servants. I'm not going to talk about Whitehall this evening. You may think, and I do, that British civil servants are an unlikely basis for getting involved in global health inequalities. But I'll tell you why. So Whitehall is the area of London where our civil service is based. And in the Whitehall studies, what we showed was that health follows the social hierarchy. The higher the status, the longer the life. In Whitehall, the higher you are, the higher you go. Height is correlated with grade of employment. Forgive this cartoon. But the social gradient is absolutely fundamental. The idea that poverty is bad for health, of course, is important. But the social gradient says that health inequalities are not limited to poor health for the poor, but where you are in the hierarchy is intimately related to your chance of health and disease. Oops. My most recent book, The Health Gap, summarized this, and the first line of my book was why treat people and send them back to the conditions that made them sick. As I'll say at the end of my lecture, I've come back to talking to doctors. I'm trained in medicine, but spent most of my life saying that the key determinants of health lie outside the healthcare system, which is not what doctors do to patients. That determines health and health inequalities. But latterly, for bizarre reasons, I've been talking to doctors again and trying to get them engaged in these issues. Forgive me, I'm going to indulge myself for a moment, but for a purpose. So that's the Italian translation of my book, and only the Italians and the title is La Salute Disuguale, was the title of the theme, it was the theme of the Trento Festival of Economics. So Trento, beautiful spot in northern Italy, has a festival of economics every year. And the economists made La Salute Disuguale the theme of their annual meeting. And they invited me to come and talk, and I'd forgotten that it was the theme of the meeting. I saw these big signs saying La Salute Disuguale. And then there was a cardboard life-size So I had that photo taken next to it, which I sent to my children, and one of my sons came back and says, I think the cutout looks better than the original. My daughter said, great shoes, Daddy. And the third edition, the third printing of the Japanese translation, the Lector, has sold out, I'm told. The Korean edition, the reason I'm indulging myself with this is to make the point that these concerns are global. When I said that British civil servants are an unlikely basis for looking at global health inequalities, but that said, these concerns are indeed global. I was giving a talk in the US about my book, and just before I was giving that lecture, Baltimore erupted. The precipitant for the eruption of civil unrest was the killing of a black man by the police. Or should I say, one more killing of a black man by the police. But the underlying cause was inequality. Because when I say Baltimore erupted, it was not Baltimore, but it was one part of Baltimore. And in fact, it was centered on Upton Druid. And life expectancy in Upton Druid for men is 63, and in Roland Park, beautiful leafy Roland Park, it's 83. I was at a meeting at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and a couple of young doctors kidnapped me and said, you cannot sit in a meeting at Johns Hopkins and think and talk about health inequalities without seeing Baltimore. We're going to take you and show you Baltimore. So we started in Upton Druid. In that part of town, there are houses with a diagonal red cross on the door. It means they've been condemned as unfit for human habitation. If there is an emergency, the emergency services will not go in there. Can you imagine what it's like to live on a street where every second house has been condemned as unfit for human habitation? I contrast LaShawn growing up in Upton Druid. Half are single-parent families. Median household income in 2010 was $17,000. I'll ask you to remember that figure for a few moments. $17,000. The kids do poorly in school, they miss school. 90% did not go on to college. Each year, a third, aged 10 to 17, are arrested for a juvenile disorder. 1/3 each year. The chance of getting to age 17 without a criminal record is very slim. In theory, the slate is wiped clean at 18, and you go for a job, and you get asked, have you ever been in trouble with the police? You could lie. That's not a very good qualification for a job, although it could get you to the White House. I don't know why that was funny. Or you could tell the truth about your criminal record, and that's not a very good qualification for getting a job. And in 2005 to 2009, there were 100 non-fatal shootings for every 10,000 residents and nearly 40 homicides. I wrote recently, in the poor part of Glasgow, growing up poor in Glasgow, there is a lot of violence. In fact, that is a characteristic of growing up poor in Glasgow, to be surrounded by violence. But I'll let you into a secret. There are very few homicides in Glasgow. Do you know why? Because there are very few guns. You know what? Fewer guns, fewer homicides. It's very hard to kill a lot of children all in one go if you only have a knife. Very easy with a gun. There are a lot about the US that I don't understand, and that's one. The other is when two New York baseball teams play each other, you call it the World Series. That's perhaps less important than this. And in Roland Park, so we went to beautiful leafy green Roland Park where the Johns Hopkins professors live. 93% two-parent families, median household income is not $17,000, but $90,000. The kids do well in school, very little truancy, and it's not 90% not going on to college, 75% complete college. Juvenile arrests, not 1 in 3, but 1 in 50 each year. No non-fatal shootings and 4 homicides, not 40. Dramatically different. And remember, a 20-year life expectancy gap. But, as I said, poor health is not confined to the poor. And probably most of you are familiar with this. Anne Case and Angus Deaton published this in 2015. Last year they did a follow-up. Brookings published it. It's looking at mortality for men and women aged 45 to 54 between 1990 and 2012. France coming down, Germany, the UK, Canada, Australia, Sweden, coming down in all these countries. Big difference between France and Sweden, much lower in Sweden, and it's been coming down in US Hispanics. And US Hispanic whites, the mortality is going on. And the causes of death, number 1, poisonings due to drugs and alcohol. Number 2, suicide. Number 3, chronic liver disease, which is alcohol related. And Case and Angus Deaton call this deaths of despair. I call it an epidemic of disempowerment. And in their later work, they show that the fewer the years of education, the steeper the rise. So the social gradient's getting steeper. And America has the highest drug death rate in the world. You, of course, also have the highest gun-related deaths in the world. This is really very bad. 52,400 drug-related per million people, and the total, 245.8 per million, and the total of 52,400. Nearly 60,000 deaths a year from drug-related poisoning, but nobody else comes close. Somebody from Penn State, Mana from Penn State, looked at the geographic distribution of deaths from drugs, alcohol, and suicide, and quartiles. So this is the highest mortality from drugs, alcohol, and suicide. That's the lowest. And then looked at voting for Donald Trump. The higher the mortality from drugs, alcohol, and suicide, the greater the likelihood to vote for Trump over Romney. Now, I'd like to think it's not the people who killed themselves then voted for Trump, but these were alternatives. I'll either kill myself or vote for Trump, who may well kill the rest of us. And it's a very clear correlation, and it relates to economic distress. The higher the mortality from drugs, alcohol, and suicide, the greater the measure of economic distress. And this has parallels with Brexit. It's the same areas of the country with economic distress, high mortality, who voted to leave. And they will be the very people who are damaged by leaving the European Union. That's what the evidence shows. The people who voted for it are the people who are going to be damaged by it. And why did they vote for it? Because they were lied to systematically by our politicians. That would never happen in the United States. And you can't see that in white on white. And as you know, life expectancy has declined 2 years in a row in the US, and the biggest contribution is unintentional injuries, which includes accidental drug overdose, now 63,600 deaths last year. And Alzheimer's, suicide. This is an appalling picture. And it's not the poorest of the poor that this is happening to, and it follows the social gradient. And it's changing the polity. My argument is that the social determinants of health inequalities are affecting health, of course. They're affecting civil disorder and crime. They're affecting political relationships and the way we're governed. Absolutely vital. This is not some niche interest. This is core to the nature of society, how we live, and it's core to health. Just to illustrate that this is not just for the poor. You're a 15-year-old boy. Go into an American school, count 100 boys just like you. 13 of you will fail to reach your 60th birthday. Is 13 out of 100 a lot? Well, it's double the Swedish figure. It's higher than in 44 other countries. The US ranks 45th on this measure. Higher than every European country. Higher than Costa Rica and Chile. And this is really very bad. It's affecting the whole of society. And when we look what's happening to life expectancy in the US, this is life expectancy at age 50 by year of birth. So the people who were born in 1920 are 50 in 1970 and beyond. And people who were born in 1950 are 50 in 2000. And you can see for men, the poorest 10%, virtually no change in life expectancy over that 30-year period. And then the richer you were, the bigger the increase in life expectancy. So the gradient, the social gradient, has got very much steeper. Are you feeling strong? You had a good day? Enjoyed Boulder and the lovely weather? Are you ready for the next slide? It comes with a health warning. This is women. This is really shocking. This is really shocking. Things are supposed to get better all the time. Bottom group, the poorest 10%, a steep decline in life expectancy at age 50, and then more, and then more. Yeah, it's great if you're in the 90th centile. It's going up very nicely, thank you. And look how the gradient's getting steeper. This cannot be ignored. These are English figures. It's figure 1 from my book, The Health Gap, and from my English review that I'll mention in a moment, showing the gradient. Each dot here represents life expectancy in the graph for each neighborhood in England, classified by degree of deprivation. And what you can see here, the people near the top have shorter life expectancy than those at the top. People in the middle, shorter than those near the top. All the way from top to bottom, the gradient. See, it's not just British civil servants. We see this nationally. This is disability-free life expectancy. The gradient's steeper. It means people at the top are living about 12 years of their life with disability, and people at the bottom are living 20 years of their lives with disability. People tell me that I have to make the economic case before anyone's going to take this seriously. Well, I've got a really cost-effective intervention. Hand out free cigarettes to the poor. It's cheap, cost-effective. Get rid of those poor people. They won't need to spend so many years in disability. You don't look very excited by that. Well, of course you're not excited by that idea. It's morally corrupt. We don't do things just because they're cheap and cost-effective. We do what's right. We run a moral filter over our actions. We're not in business to save governments money. We're in business to try and improve the health of the population and to reduce the unfair distribution of health inequity. And the reason I was so pleased to come to speak in honour of Dick Jessor is because my view is that the mind is the important gateway by which the social environment impacts on health. Mental illness and well-being, and psychosocial pathways to physical illness through behaviours and through stress pathways. I mentioned Glasgow. Glasgow has high mortality. There is a Glasgow effect. This slide compares Glasgow with Manchester and Liverpool, 3 post-industrial cities. You probably only know them if you watch the English Premier League on television, because they've got football teams. 3 post-industrial cities with similar levels of poverty and inequality. But Glasgow has higher mortality than Manchester and Liverpool. And the causes? Drug-related poisonings, alcohol, suicide, and external causes, accidents and violence. Sound familiar? They're the ones I just told you about with the rise of mortality in US non-Hispanic whites. And they're all psychosocial in origin. Now the key thing about health inequalities, the social gradient, is it doesn't have to be that way. Now, all societies have social and economic inequalities. And if health follows from those social and economic inequalities, you might argue that there will always be health inequalities. And the answer is, yeah, there probably will. But the magnitude changes. I've just shown you US data where the inequalities are getting steeper over time. So within a society, the magnitude can change. And across societies, the magnitude varies. This is life expectancy at 25 for 15 European countries by level of education. ISCED 0 to 2, that's the International Social Classification of Education. 0 to 2 is primary, and 5 to 6 is tertiary. So here's Sweden. SE is Sweden, has the longest life expectancy of 25, and a very narrow gap between those with primary education and those with tertiary. Sweden, Italy, Norway, Malta, Denmark. Look at the other end. Estonia has lower average and a huge gap, a steep gradient. Hungary, Romania. I'll give someone a prize if they know what HR stands for. Croatia. God. Here in Boulder, Colorado. Another way of looking at this is that the between-country differences are much smaller for people with university education. They do know how to get good health in Croatia because people with university education have good health. The between-country differences are much bigger for people with primary education. The disadvantage related to primary education is much bigger in the East than the West. If you think that health is a matter of individual responsibility and people are responsible for their own ill health, then you could say you're criminally irresponsible to be born in Estonia if you're only going to have primary education. You should at least make the choice to have a Swedish mother if you're only going to have primary education. Otherwise, it's your own fault being born in Estonia. What were you thinking? And if we look at the so-called Preston curve, my demographer friends, if we look at the so-called Preston curve, updated, income per person at purchasing power parities, GDP. Here at low incomes, there's a steep relation between income and life expectancy. But when you get to about $13,000, Costa Rica, Chile, Cuba, and go all the way up via the poor old USA out to Luxembourg with its ill-gotten gains, tax dodgers and God knows what. There's simply no relation between national income and life expectancy. Once you get to this inflection point of Costa Rica, Cuba, around $13,000, getting richer is not the secret to getting healthier for a country. Improving social conditions may well be. And look at this, the former Soviet Union, Russia, Kazakhstan, Belarus, Lithuania, richer than Costa Rica, but much worse life expectancy. It's not just income, it's how it's distributed and what it means in terms of social conditions. I ask you, this is a test of your short-term memory, to remember the median household income in the poor part of Baltimore. Croatia said it, a great audience. $17,000. $17,000. That's $4,000 richer than Costa Rica. And yet, life expectancy in Costa Rica, well, the average is just under 80. For men, it's about 76. In the poor part of Baltimore, it was 62. They're richer because these are purchasing power parities. It's adjusted to the US dollar purchasing power. The poor part of Baltimore, they're $4,000 a head richer than the Costa Rican average. And life expectancy is 14 years shorter. Now, no one would be in any doubt that living in the poor part of Baltimore is living in poverty. But it's not poverty just of dollars. It's poverty of conditions through the life course. And to deal with what those conditions were, I chaired the WHO Commission on Social Determinants of Health. We called our report Closing the Gap in a Generation. We were dealing with greater than 40-year gaps in life expectancy between countries, 20 years and more gaps within countries, and we called our report Closing the Gap in a Generation. Shows what happens when you let academics loose on something seriously bonkers. Closing the gap in a generation. It was a statement that we had the knowledge to close the gap in a generation. We have the means to close the gap in a generation. The question is, do we have the will to close the gap in a generation? And we put on the cover of our report, social injustice is killing on a grand scale. Slightly unusual for a WHO report. The Director General nearly had a hemorrhage. And we put at the heart of what we're trying to achieve empowerment. Material, psychosocial, and political. I was then asked by the British government, how could we apply the findings and recommendations of your global commission to one country, England? and I produced the Marmot Review. I called it Fair Society, Healthy Lands, a statement that if we put fairness at the heart of all policy making, health would improve and health inequalities would diminish. And we have had 6 domains of recommendations, and I'll touch briefly on them. Let me brief, because you'll all leave before I finish. And the first was give every child the best start in life. We've been monitoring what's been happening to these key social determinants in England. So we've been looking at the proportion of children age 5 that have a good level of development. Look first at the blue dots. The blue dots represent the proportion of children age 5 that have a good level of development in each local authority in the country, classified by an index of vulnerable deprivation. So these are the more affluent, more deprived, and as you'd expect, the more affluent have a higher proportion of children age 5 with a good level of development. They scatter around the line, so at a given level of deprivation, some local areas are doing better than others, and I'll come to that in a moment. But one strategy to reduce the inequalities, the gradient in early child development, is to reduce poverty. If you could move these local authorities up towards the middle, then more children would have a good level of development. They're the blue dots. Now you're allowed to look at the red dots. One measure of poverty we use in Britain is eligibility for free school meals. It's a means-tested benefit. Only the poorer children are eligible for free school meals. FSM, free school meals. And this really upset me. I asked Jason earlier today, and he was showing me a finding. I said, did you predict it? And he said he did. I didn't predict this. This is the opposite of what I predicted. The children, the poor kids, are doing better in poor areas. I thought the poor kids would do better in rich areas. So I did what any scientist would do. I tried to falsify it and try and get rid of it. I really didn't agree with my prior hypothesis, so the data had to be wrong. Isn't that what you do? Well, it turns out I couldn't get rid of it. We hadn't made a coding error. We hadn't done something wrong with the analysis. It was really true. Oh my God, I might have to change my mind. You never have to admit to that. As Keynes said, when the facts change, I change my opinion. What did you do, say? Well, I had to change my opinion. What's going on here? Why are the poor kids doing better in poor areas than they are in rich areas? So I went out to East London. It's always in, I don't know, US cities, but in British cities, it's always the east part that's the poor part. Is that true in the US? No. Anyway, British cities is always the poor part. So these are the average for England as a whole. 60% of children age 5 have a good level of development. Children eligible for free school meals, just under 45%. The gap is nearly 16%. Now look at Hackney, a poor part of East London. The poor kids eligible for free school meals are doing as well as the English average. I said to them, what are you doing in Hackney? And the director of education said to me, we tell ourselves every day, poverty is not destiny. What we do when we get up in the morning is try and counter the disadvantage of being born into a poor family. And by golly, they're succeeding. The gap's only 4%. Now, Bath, beautiful Georgian Bath, if you've ever been to that lovely part of England, I was catching a train to Swansea in South Wales, and the train stopped in Bath Spa, and I called out, "What do you do for poor kids in Bath?" Now, I'm not hearing voices, but I imagine them calling back saying, "Poor kids? We didn't know we had any." Aha! That may well be what's going on with this huge gap in Bath. They don't focus on the poor kids because there aren't very many of them. In Hackney, if you don't focus on the poor kids, you're not doing your job because there's so many of them. And it's inspiring. I don't know why people want to tell lies. The truth is much more inspiring than the lies. You can really make a difference by focusing on it. So, I said the other way of dealing with the gradient is to reduce child poverty. There's a random rich country. Child poverty is 29%. In Denmark, it's 9%. In Iceland, 10%. Norway, Finland, Korea, Cyprus, Netherlands, Sweden's gone up a bit because it's had a growth of inequality. I was giving a lecture at an opening session of the American Public Health Association. There were 7,000 people there. And I said to them, I didn't have these figures then, but I had figures something like that. And I said, you live in a democracy. This must be the level of child poverty that you want. Otherwise, you'd vote a government that did something different. Somebody said, do you think he'll get asked back? Well, you did vote a new government, and they're worse. They're going to make child poverty worse. Because this is the effect of government policy on child poverty. Finland reduces child poverty through the tax and benefit system by 65%. Finland, Iceland, Norway, they use, the Minister of Finance uses the fiscal system, tax and benefits, to reduce child poverty. For once, the UK doesn't look so bad, and there's the US. You've decided we'll have lots of rich people, but we won't tax them or have a benefit system that reduces child poverty. That is government policy aimed at increasing health inequalities. And now you ask, why do you rank 45th in the world at the chance of a 15-year-old boy surviving to 60? This is not a mystery. The other side of early child development is not just the good things that can happen, but the bad things that can happen. And adverse child experiences predict mortality. Number of adverse child experiences, the higher the mortality. And very similar figures from the US, but it's been estimated in England that if you could remove adverse child experiences, you would reduce early sex by 1/3 before the age of 16, unintended teen pregnancy by 38%, smoking by 1/6, binge drinking, cannabis use, heroin. Look at this, perpetration of violence. If you could abolish adverse child experiences, you could reduce the perpetration of violence by half. And even more chilling, the victims of violence. Half of them had 4 or more adverse child experiences. And domestic violence, of course, is a global problem. 1 in 3 women throughout the world will experience physical and or sexual violence by a partner or sexual violence by a non-partner. Somebody tweeted on International Women's Day last year. Education, that's a fancy way of saying education. PISA scores, the Program of International Student Assessment, at age 15. Finland, by economic and social quartile, there's a gradient, but Finland always does the best in Europe. There's the UK, steeper gradient, and there's the US. Your top quartile is way below Finland, and you have a steeper gradient, so your bottom quartile is way, way, way below Finland, let alone Macau in China. So high levels of child poverty that you have, poor performance in education with a steep social gradient, and then, of course, issues to do with income. Ensure a healthy standard of living. These are British figures. Looking at the long-run impact of tax and benefit reforms introduced between 2015 and 2019 by Income Jessor. Look at families with children. These are the decisions made by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Minister of Finance, as a result of the reforms that he's introduced. The poorest 10% will have a 10% drop in their income by 2019. The next 10% will have a 12% drop in their income by 2019. And then the higher your income, the less the reduction as a result of the Chancellor's tax and benefit changes. So he introduced a policy whose explicit purpose was to be regressive, redistribution upwards. And you've done things similar in the USA. If you look going back to the 1960s, the top 0.1% has had a 2 percentage points reduction in their tax burden, and the bottom 50% has had an increase of 4%. So explicit. US people say to me, we're not in favor of redistribution, but you've been doing it upwards. I'm concerned about time. I said that I've been trying to get the doctors involved, come back to doctors, and my plea to them was why treat people and send them back to the conditions that make them sick. And I spent a year as president of the World Medical Association. Really bizarre that someone who spent his whole life saying the key determinants of health are not what doctors do for patients should spend a year with the world's doctors, the National Medical Associations. And my mission for the year, I've said, my 2 messages, were evidence-based policy presented in a spirit of social justice. Remember, we said on the report of the WHO Commission, social injustice is killing on a grand scale. And we had a meeting in Washington, D.C. of the Commission on Equity and Health and Equalities in the Americas that I'm chairing. And I went wandering in the mall. And I came in the area of the mall that was honoring Martin Luther King. You're familiar with this, but I wasn't. King said, I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love. And I thought, well, unarmed truth, evidence-based policy is a bit more prosaic than unarmed truth. And unconditional love, well, spirit of social justice, that'll do. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. That is why right, temporarily defeated, is stronger than evil triumphant. We have a lot of evil in the world right now. Brexit, right-wing regimes in Hungary, Poland, the alt-right in Germany, not to mention what's going on in this country. There's a lot of bad stuff going on. But Martin Luther King said, I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. I was invited to Australia to give some lectures for the Australian Broadcasting Commission, the Australian version of the BBC, although the Australians wouldn't like my saying that, the Australian version of the BBC. And The Australian Medical Association wrote to me and said, we've heard you're coming, can we do anything for you? One advantage of being president of the WMA. And I said, yeah, I'd like to see doctors in action on the social determinants of health. What can you show me? Well, in Australia, they're very concerned about the gap in health between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. Australian Aborigines have a life expectancy that's 10.6 years shorter for men, 9.4 years shorter for women than non-Indigenous. And the day I arrived, the journalist said to me, we've spent billions of dollars trying to close this health gap. What should we be doing? I said, I just arrived. I'm just arrived. Give me 24 hours, I'll tell you tomorrow. Well, the Australian Medical Association people took me to this Aboriginal community centre, 50 kilometres south of Sydney, the Tharawal Community Centre. They have doctors there. Oh, this is lovely. Aboriginal women don't attend antenatal classes. The way they encourage them to attend is they took plaster casts of their pregnant torsos and then decorated them with Aboriginal art. And the women loved it. I loved it. It was just lovely, gorgeous. And the women come and they like it. So they come before pregnancy, during pregnancy, and after birth of the baby, postnatal care clinic in their home. And they have legal services, housing, various services on site. The kids, they have childcare. Well, I could have spent days at this centre. I was only allowed a few hours. While I was there, the little ones were being put down for their afternoon sleep. And so I had time to talk to the woman who was looking after them. I said, how do you know if these children are developing normally? She took a stack of forms off the shelf with 30 indicators, one form for each child, with 30 indicators of cognitive, linguistic, social, emotional, behavioural development. Where did you get these from? She said, from the university. So they're monitoring these kids to see how well they're doing. The Deadly Homework Club, so the older kids are engaged. Every family attends one of these evaluated programs to improve outcomes, parenting and children. Drugs and alcohol. So this campus, when I got to the drugs and alcohol section, I said to this big Aboriginal woman who was running that, I said, you must have the most difficult job in this whole place. She said, no, I have the most rewarding job in this whole place. And she took me over and showed me an Aboriginal painting on the wall. And she said, the man who did this, when he came here, he had drug problems and alcohol and domestic violence. And we helped him put his life back together. And he did this painting as a gift to us. I have the most rewarding job in this centre, she said. And they have subsidised fruit and vegetables. The elders, and if you can read this, Grannies Against Removal. There was a vote in Australia to remove Aboriginal children from their families and bring them up in institutions to try and breed the Aboriginal out of them. It is known as the stolen generation, and it was a disaster. And I talked to the psychologist at the centre, and she was dealing with the consequences of removal, Grannies Against Removal. I said, are you talking about the stolen generation? She said, it's still going on. Social workers, perhaps with good intentions, are removing children from their families because of drugs and alcohol and domestic abuse. And then she gave me the answer to the journalist's question. We spent billions, but we haven't closed the health gap. And she said, if for 200 years, systematically, you deprive people of dignity, of self-esteem, of control over their life and their circumstances, it's hardly surprising that simply spending money doesn't close the health gap. You do need to spend money, but you also need to pay attention to dignity, to control over your life. I said I gave these lectures for the ABC, and to trail the programs, they had, this was radio, but they had it on the television current affairs, and I had a panel about inequalities, and the, whatever you call him, the director of the debate, said to me, he'd read my lectures, and he said, could you say what you said about income distribution? So I said, what do the 48 million people of Tanzania have in common with the 7 million people who make up the population of Paraguay, the 2 million people who make up the population of Latvia, and the top earning 25 hedge fund managers in New York? And the answer is, the previous year, each of those groups had a combined income of in the range of $25 billion. Suppose, I said, the hedge fund managers gave up their money for 1 year. Wouldn't miss it. They're going to earn $1 billion each the next year. And you transferred that money to Tanzania, it would double the per capita income. And I'm not suggesting simply giving it to individual Tanzanians, so that would not be a bad thing to do. But think of the clean water you could pipe to villages, the clean cook stoves you could provide, the nurses, the teachers you could employ. Now I know this is fanciful, but just suppose the hedge fund managers say, we couldn't care less about Tanzania. I know. But here's an even more fanciful thought experiment. Suppose they paid 1/3 of their income in tax. I know. You and I pay 1/3 of our income in tax. The hedge fund managers don't pay tax. That's for little people. So, but if they paid 1/3 of their income in tax, you could employ 90,000 New York school teachers. Don't tell me there's not enough money. And another member of the panel said, you're in fantasy land, mate. That's never going to happen. You're in complete fantasy land. And the next morning, when I went to the Aboriginal Community Centre, one of the doctors greeted me with this sign. I say to you, come join me in my fantasy land, and let's make a fairer world.